The carriage had scarcely halted on the gravel before the Duke of Octan heard the words that were meant to shame him. "She cannot walk, your grace." Sir Roderick utterly said it loudly from the far side of the forecourt, as though flinging a stone he already regretted throwing. "I'll not have it said I hid the truth from you. My daughter is a cripple, and has been these 15 years. If you find the bargain spoiled, the fault is your own for making it sight unseen." Ewart stood upon the stone steps of Octan Hall and did not move. The dusk had gone to low gold behind the elms, and the lanterns at the door threw their warm light across the drive, so that the black lacquer of the travelling carriage shone like still water. He was aware of his own steward at his shoulder, of the 2 grooms holding the horses, of the whole waiting household arranged behind him in the manner he had commanded, and he was aware above all of the small pale face that had turned toward him from within the carriage window. She was looking at him, not down, not away as a frightened woman might, but directly, her chin level, her grey eyes steady in the lantern light. There was fear in her. He could read it in the set of her mouth, in the whiteness of the gloved hand that gripped the window frame, but she did not let the fear govern her face. She looked at the Duke of Octan as though she were taking his measure, and finding the reckoning a matter of some interest. "You will forgive me, Sir Roderick," Ewart said, and his voice carried without his raising it, "if I decline to receive my bride at shouting distance. I do not conduct my affairs across a courtyard." He came down the steps. He was aware of the ripple that went through the servants, for he had not told them what he meant to do, having not entirely known it himself until this moment. He crossed the gravel with an unhurried stride, and the crunch of stone beneath his boots was the only sound, for even Sir Roderick had fallen silent, plainly braced for the scene of disgust he had come prepared to witness. The man wanted it, Ewart understood suddenly. He wanted the great feared Duke of Octan to recoil, to send the carriage away, to release him from a bargain he had entered in desperation and now could not stomach. It would solve some corner of his ruined pride to be able to say the Duke had refused her. Ewart reached the carriage door and opened it himself. The footman who ought to have done it startled back. Within, the young woman sat with a travelling rug across her lap, her hands folded upon it, her back straight against the squabs. Close now, he saw that she was younger than he had expected, perhaps 22, and that her gown was modest to the point of plainness, a grey travelling dress, well kept but turned at the cuffs, the gown of a family that had once had money and had it no longer. Her dark hair was drawn back simply, with a few strands loosened by the journey lying against her cheek. She was, he thought with a strange lurch beneath his ribs, quite beautiful, in a manner that had nothing to do with adornment and everything to do with the way she held herself. "Your Grace," she said, her voice was low and even, "I fear my father has spared you nothing. I cannot rise to meet you. If you mean to send me back, I would be obliged if you would say so quickly, before the horses are unhitched. It is a long road, and I should like to reach the inn at Marden before full dark." Ewart looked at her a long moment. "I do not mean to send you back," he said. Something crossed her face then, not relief, he thought, for she was too guarded for relief, but a swift recalculation, as though he had made a move upon the board she had not foreseen. Behind him, across the gravel, he heard Sir Roderick make a small sound. "Miss Utterly," Ewart said, "I am going to lift you from this carriage and carry you within. I tell you so that you are not surprised by it, and so that you may object if you find it not to your liking. But I will not have my wife handed down like baggage by a footman, nor set upon the gravel in a chair before my whole household as though she were an invalid to be managed. You will come into my house in my arms, or you will tell me another way you would prefer, and we shall do that instead. The choice is yours." He watched her absorb this. He watched her weigh it, quickly, the way he imagined she weighed everything. For a woman who could not walk in a world built for walking must learn to calculate a great many things a walking person never troubled to think of. And he watched the moment she decided to trust him, not fully, not yet, but enough. "I have no objection," she said, "provided you do not drop me. I am told I am heavier than I look." "You are told wrongly," he said, "by people who have never had the carrying of you." And he was surprised to hear in his own voice something that was very nearly warmth. He leaned into the carriage. He put one arm beneath her knees, through the folds of the travelling rug, and the other about her back, and he felt her go rigid for an instant. The instinct of a body long accustomed to being handled without gentleness, he thought, and the thought put a coldness in him toward the man standing on his gravel. Then he lifted her, and she was light in his arms, light as a girl, and she caught her breath and put one gloved hand against his chest to steady herself, and for a moment they were very close, her face near his, her grey eyes wide. "There," he said quietly, for her alone. "You see." Not heavy at all. He turned with her in his arms. The travelling rug slipped and would have fallen. The young woman caught it with a quick motion and drew it back across her lap, and he saw the colour come up in her cheeks. Not shame, he decided, but the fierce dignity of a person who would not her helplessness put on display, and who had gathered the fallen rug herself rather than let him or anyone stoop to it. He respected that. He found, to his own faint astonishment, that he respected a great many things about her already, and he had known her the space of 2 minutes. He carried her across the forecourt. Sir Roderick stood in his path, and Ewart stopped before him, and for a moment the two men looked at one another over the young woman held between them. "You expected me to refuse her," Ewart said. The older man's face worked. He was perhaps 55, with the broken veins and soft jowls of a man who had drowned a good many disappointments in a good many bottles, and there was in his eyes a wretched mixture of relief and resentment that Ewart found he could not pity, though he understood it well enough. "I expected," Sir Roderick said thickly, "a man to know what he was buying." "Then we are both surprised," said the Duke of Octarn, "for I find I have got a great deal more than I bargained for." He felt the young woman go still in his arms at that, rather than saw the sharp turn of her attention. "The settlement papers are in my study, signed and witnessed. My steward will conduct you to your rooms, and in the morning you may take your money and go. You will forgive me if I do not press you to remain longer than the business requires." He did not wait for an answer. He carried his bride up the steps of Octarn Hall, and in through the great doors, into the light and the warmth, and he heard behind him the whole household draw breath together, and he did not care. Within, the entrance hall rose 2 stories to a painted ceiling, and the candles had been lit in the sconces along the stair, and a fire burned in the vast hearth, though the evening was mild, for he had ordered warmth against his bride's arrival, without quite admitting to himself why. He was aware of the young woman looking about her, at the marble, at the portraits of dead Dukes of Octarn glowering down from their frames, at the sheer scale of the place, and he wondered what it looked like to her, this cold, magnificent house into which she had been sold. "You may set me down," she said, "in a chair, if there is one. I would not have your arms give out in front of your servants. It would spoil the effect." He found himself smiling, which was a thing he did rarely enough that the housekeeper, Mrs. Bell, visibly startled to see it. "My arms will not give out," he said, but he carried her to the great settle by the fire and set her down upon it with a care he had not known was in him, arranging the cushions at her back before he straightened. "There, Mrs. Bell will bring you tea, and whatever else you require. You've had a long journey. I have had a longer bargain," she said. She looked up at him. In the firelight her grey eyes had gone almost silver, and there was in them still that watchful calculation, but under it now, something he could not name. "Your Grace, why did you not refuse me?" "You might have. My father made certain you would have grounds. He wished you to. It would have freed him of the shame of me and cost him nothing but the match." Ewart stood over her, his hands clasped behind his back, and considered how much to say. "Because," he said at last, "I was married once before Miss Utterly, to a woman the whole county called the most fortunate match in 3 shires, sound of limb, fair of face, and possessed of a heart like a January millpond. She could walk very well. She walked away from me a great many times, in every way but the leaving of the house, and when she died I did not grieve her, and that not grieving has sat upon my conscience these 4 years like a stone. So you will forgive me if I do not set overmuch store by a pair of legs. I have found them, in my experience, no measure at all of the woman they carry." She was silent. The fire snapped. Somewhere in the depths of the house a door closed. "That is the plainest thing anyone has said to me in a long while," she said finally. "I did not expect plainness from a man they call the Beast of Octarn. They call me that? They call you worse." My father recited the whole catalogue on the journey, I think to frighten me. though whether he meant to frighten me into gratitude or into flight I could not tell. Her mouth curved, the first true thing near a smile he had seen from her, and it changed her face entirely. He was disappointed on both counts. I do not frighten quickly. It is the one advantage of a life spent being carried into rooms I did not choose. One grows accustomed to arriving where one is put, and making the best of the furniture. Ewart looked down at her for a long moment. "You will not," he said, "be furniture in this house." He had not planned to say it. It came out of him with a weight that surprised them both, and he saw her eyes widen a fraction, saw her guard come up again as though against a blow she did not understand. "That is a large promise," she said. "To a woman you mean to marry for her father's convenience and your own." "It is." He inclined his head. "We shall see whether I am equal to it." Mrs. Bell, for the housekeeper had appeared at the edge of the hall, a stout, kind-faced woman twisting her apron in an agony of uncertainty. "This is Miss Jessamy Utley, who will be mistress of this house within the fortnight. You will attend her yourself and see that her rooms want for nothing. She is to be given the blue apartments in the east front that catch the morning sun, and you will have Perkins see to it that every threshold and stair she might wish to pass is made level for her chair, and I will not hear that any of it could not be done. Is that clear?" Mrs. Bell curtsied so deeply she nearly overset herself. "Yes, Your Grace, very clear, Your Grace." And then, unable to help herself, she crossed to the settle and beamed down at the young woman with such open warmth that Ewart saw Jessamy blink at it. "Bless you, my dear, you've had a cold, long road and no mistake, and here's me gawping. There's a good fire in the blue rooms already and soup on, and we'll have you comfortable in no time. Cripple or no cripple, you're the first bit of proper company this poor house has seen in." "Mrs. Bell," said the Duke. "That is to say," said Mrs. Bell, colouring, "welcome, Miss Utley. Truly welcome." "Thank you," said Jessamy, and Ewart saw that the housekeeper's clumsy kindness had reached her where his own careful courtesy had not, for her eyes had gone bright and she looked quickly down at her folded hands to master herself. "You are very kind. It is a novelty kindness. Forgive me. I am tireder than I knew." Ewart watched her fight the weariness and the feeling both and win, and lift her head again composed, and he thought, whoever taught this woman to armour herself so thoroughly did her a great cruelty and a great service both, and I should like very much to know which of them is the deeper wound. "Rest, Miss Utley," he said. "You are safe in this house. Whatever else you have been told of me, believe that much. No harm will come to you under this roof while I draw breath, and that is not a bargain but a fact. And it began the moment my hands took your weight and not one instant later. We will speak in the morning, when your father has taken his money and gone, and you and I may begin to learn what manner of people we are to be to one another." He bowed to her, a full bow, the bow he would have made to a duchess, and he saw her mark it, and he left her to the fire and the housekeeper's fussing, and went to find her father and to pay, in cold coin, for the finest thing that had ever been carried across his threshold. Ewart did not sleep. He sat late in his study, the settlement papers spread before him upon the desk, and read them again by candlelight, though he knew their every clause. The sum was not large. That was the thing that would not leave him. Sir Roderick Utley had traded his only daughter into the house of a man the whole county named a monster, for a sum that would clear his gaming debts and leave him a little over to begin the ruin again. A sum, in truth, that Ewart would not have thought twice to spend upon a hunter or a season's improvements to the home farm. He had bought a woman for the price of a horse, and the woman was worth, he was increasingly certain, a very great deal more than the horse. He had watched her at supper, which she had taken in her rooms, for she had been too weary to be carried down, and he had gone up himself, to the astonishment of the entire household, to ask whether she wanted for anything. He had found her propped against pillows in the great blue bed, a shawl about her shoulders, a book open upon her knee, and she had looked up at him over the candle with those grey watchful eyes and said, "You keep a good library, Your Grace. I found this on the table by the window. I hope you do not mind that I took it. I have not read a new book in 3 years. My father sold the last of ours before Michaelmas," and he had stood in the doorway of her chamber, absurdly moved by the sight of a woman reading in his house, and said only, "The library is yours, all of it." You need not ask. And go away before he could make a greater fool of himself. Now in the small hours he paid Sir Roderick's price into a strong box and locked it, and in the morning he had the man brought to him, and gave him the box, and watched him count it with shaking hands. You'll not regret it, Sir Roderick said, not meeting his eye. She was always the clever one, cleverer than her brothers, God rest them. It was the fever took her legs when she was 7. Before that she ran about like any child. After he stopped, his jaw worked. After, her mother could not look at her without weeping, and then her mother died, and he stopped again. You'll not regret it, he said again, and had the sound of a man trying to convince himself. I regret only, said the Duke of Octane, that I did not come for her sooner, so that she might have had these 15 years in a house where was not a grief to those who ought to have loved her. Take your money, Sir Roderick, and go, and do not come to this house again unless she sends for you. She will not, I think, but the choice will be hers, not yours. You have made your last choice concerning your daughter. Good day, he had the man shown out. He did not offer his hand. Jessamy came down that morning for the first time. Ewart had given the order the night before, and Perkins and the joiners had worked by lamplight, and where there had been 3 steps down from the east corridor to the morning room there was now a smooth-boarded ramp, roughly made but sound, and the thresholds along her path had been planed level, and a wheeled chair of the newest kind. He had sent a groom riding through the night to the town to fetch it from the instrument-maker, who had one made up for an old general, stood waiting at the foot of the great stair. He carried her down the stair himself. It was becoming already the part of his day he found he did not wish to delegate. You have been busy, your grace, she said, as he settled her into the wheeled chair, and she ran her hands over its arms, testing it, and turned the wheels experimentally, and he saw the quick pleasure of a mind understanding a new mechanism. This is a very fine chair. Better than my old one by a great measure. Where did it come from? The town. The town is 11 miles distant. 11.5, said Ewart. She looked up at him. She was silent a moment, and he could not read her, and then she said, You sent for it in the night. I sent for it, he said, when it became clear to me that my house was built by men who never once imagined a woman like you might wish to move through it freely. That is a fault in the house, Miss Utley, and not in you, and I mean to correct it room by room, until me go anywhere within these walls, without asking leave of anyone, myself included. It will take some weeks. You must be patient with the noise. She turned the wheels of the chair slowly, and rolled a little way down the corridor, and back, and he watched her discover the freedom of the level floor he had made for her, watched her go where she wished without a pair of arms to carry her, and he saw her face when she thought he was not looking, and it undid something in him that he had thought long since dead. No one, she said, not turning round, has ever built a thing to fit me. It is always I who must be fitted to the thing, or carried past it, or left behind at the foot of it. I do not quite know what to do with a house that means to fit itself to me. I have no practice at it. You will learn, said the Duke of Octane. You strike me as a quick study. She laughed then, a real laugh, short and surprised, as though it had escaped her before she could prevent it, and turned the chair to face him, and the morning light came through the tall windows and fell across her, and Ewart thought that he had never in his life seen anything he wanted so much to keep. They were married 11 days later, in the small chapel on the estate, with only the household for witnesses and the old rector to say the words. Ewart had asked her whether she wished it larger, whether she wished her father sent for, and she had said no to both with a flatness that closed the subject. She came to the altar in the wheeled chair, in a gown of dove-grey silk that Mrs. Bell and the village seamstress had made over from bolts fetched from the town, and Ewart lifted her to stand beside him for the vows, holding her weight easily against his side, her hand in his. And she stood in the circle of his arm before God and made her promises in a clear, steady voice, and he made his, and found that he meant them more than he had meant anything in a very long while. He carried her out of the chapel into a grey afternoon, and the servants threw flowers, and Mrs. Bell wept openly, and old Perkins, the estate carpenter, who had built her ramps with his own hands, blew his nose like a trumpet. And that night, when he brought her to the door of her chamber, Ewart set her down in her chair and did not follow her in. You are my wife, he said. In law and before God, but you were sold to me, Jessamy, and I will not have you feel bought. What is between us, if anything is to be between us, will come in its own time and by your own wish, or it will not come at all. I am content to wait. I have a great deal of practice at waiting. Good night. He saw her look up at him, and he saw that he had surprised her again, and that she did not entirely believe him, having been given, he supposed, small reason in her life to believe that a man might want a thing and forbear to take it. But she inclined her head. "Good night, your grace," she said. And then, as he turned Ewart, he stopped. "You told me your name in the courtyard to your steward," she said. "I heard it. I have been calling you your grace for 11 days because I did not know whether I was permitted the other. Am I? You are my wife," he said. "You are permitted anything in this house that you wish to permit yourself. That was rather my whole meaning." "Ewart, then," she said, and tried it, and he found that his own name in her mouth did something to him that he was not prepared for, standing in a corridor at midnight, and he bowed and went away quickly before it could show upon his face. The weeks that followed were the strangest and the best of Ewart's life, though he would not have been able to say so at the time, being a man little given to examining his own contentment for fear of finding the seam by which it might be unpicked. The house changed. Perkins and his joiners worked their way through it, room by room, and the ramps went in, and the thresholds came level, and doors were widened, and a lift of ropes and counterweights was built by an engineer summoned from the city to carry her between the floors. So that within a month Jessamy of Octarn now, could go very nearly anywhere in the great house alone, and did, exploring it with the frank curiosity of a woman who had spent 15 years confined to whatever ground-floor room her father saw fit to keep her in. Ewart would come upon her in the long gallery, or the disused music room, or the library where she spent most of her hours, and each time the sight of her moving freely through his house struck him afresh, as though he had done a thing more remarkable than he had known. And she was not, he found, a comfortable woman to have about the place, and he was glad of it, for he had had his fill of comfortable women. She had opinions, a great many of them, sharply held and cleanly argued, and she was not in the least afraid of him, which no one else in his life had managed for 20 years. She read his newspapers before he did and disputed the leaders with him over breakfast. She discovered, going through the estate books he had carelessly left where she might find them, an error in his steward's accounting of the North tenancies that had cost him £200 a year for a decade, and pointed it out to him with a dry satisfaction that made him laugh aloud. She learned the names of every servant in the house within a fortnight, and their troubles too, and where he ruled the household by a cold word and a colder silence, she began, quietly, to rule it by something warmer, so that the house that had been a mausoleum for 4 years began, imperceptibly, to feel like a place where people lived. He watched it happen. He watched his own house come back to life around her, and he understood, slowly, that it was not the house that had been dead. "You are staring at me, Ewart," she said one evening from her place by the library fire, not looking up from her book. "You do it a great deal, I have noticed. Is there something upon my face, or do you simply find me an object of scientific interest, like the fossils in the long gallery?" "You are more diverting than the fossils," he said, faint praise. "The fossils are 400 million years old and cannot answer back. You set a low bar, husband." But she looked up then, and there was colour in her cheeks, and the firelight in her grey eyes. And she held his gaze across the room a moment longer than she needed to, and it was Ewart who looked away first, and heard her soft breath of something that might have been laughter, or might have been the same unsteadiness he felt. It was the chest that undid the last of his composure. He had found her one wet afternoon in the library, frowning at the great inlaid board his grandfather had brought back from the continent, moving the pieces about in some study of her own, and he had asked, idly, whether she played. And she had looked up at him with a gleam he was learning to be wary of, and said that she played a little, and would he care for a game? He had cared for a game. He had considered himself in a modest way a strong player. She beat him in 19 moves, and again in 22, and a third time so swiftly and with such quiet ferocity that he set down the fallen king and laughed aloud, and demanded to know where a gentleman's daughter had learned to play like a cavalry general. In a chair, she said, not without an edge, but not, he thought, chiefly bitter. In 15 years of long afternoons in which there was very little else a person in my position was permitted to do, one learns to fight the battles one is allowed. I was not allowed to ride, or dance, or walk in the shrubbery with a young man, or do any of the 100 things a girl my age was doing while I sat by the window. But no one thought to forbid me the chessboard, it being a quiet ladder-like thing to keep an invalid occupied. They did not understand what they had put in my hands. I have been laying siege to kingdoms across 64 squares since I was 9 years old, Your Grace, and I have grown very good at it, and it is nearly the only place in the whole of my life where my legs have never once come into the reckoning. On the board I am no cripple. On the board I am the equal of any man alive, and rather the better of most of them, as you have now discovered to your cost. Shall we play again? You are improving. You lasted 4 moves longer that time. There may be hope for you yet. And Ewart, resetting the pieces with his own hands, understood that he was in the presence of a mind that 15 years of confinement had not blunted but honed to a terrible edge, a mind that had been given a single narrow outlet, and had poured the whole of its unspent force through it. And he thought of all the drawing rooms in which such a woman had sat by the window, discussed just out of hearing, pitied and worked around and never once seen. And he felt the cold anger toward the world that had wasted her rise him again, and under it, warmer and more dangerous. The beginning of something he did not yet dare to name. He was falling in love with his wife. He knew it by then with the same cold clarity he brought to his accounts and his tenancies. He had bought a woman for the price of a horse, and she had walked, no, he corrected himself, she had rolled, chin up, grey eyes level, straight into the ruined center of him and set about rebuilding it as though it were a house that only wanted the right thresholds made level. And he was afraid, the great feared Duke of Octon, the beast, afraid that if he reached for her, if he spoke, he would frighten away the one wholly good thing that had ever come to him, and that had come, God help him, in chains he himself had paid for. So he waited. He was good at waiting. He did not know that his waiting had a term, and that the term was drawing near, and that it would be set not by his own courage but by the arrival, on a wet October morning, of a letter in a hand he did not know, bearing news that would force the whole careful patient structure of his forbearance to its crisis at last. The letter was from Sir Roderick Utley, and it was, as Ewart might have predicted, a plea for money. He read it standing at the window of his study with the rain running down the glass. It was a wretched document, by turns wheedling and threatening, the letter of a man sinking who has caught sight of a rope and does not much care whom he must climb over to reach it. The gaming debts had returned, as such debts always did. There were men in the town, Sir Roderick wrote, dangerous men, to whom he owed sums he could not name upon paper. And then, near the end, the true poison, set down as though in passing. It would be a grief to him, Sir Roderick wrote, a very great grief, if word of certain matters concerning his daughter's condition were to reach the ears of society, for the world was cruel, and would say cruel things, and the good name of Octon was a delicate thing, and surely his Grace would agree that some small further consideration, paid quietly and regularly, would be a sensible arrangement for all parties, and a comfort to a lonely father in his declining years. You ought read it twice. Then he set it down very carefully upon the desk, because his hand had begun to shake with a rage so pure and cold that he did not trust himself to hold the paper without crushing it, and crushing it would not have satisfied him, and he wished to keep it whole as evidence of what the man was. He was still standing so when the study door opened and Jessamy came in her chair, having learned the rump Perkins had built to his study door and used it now without a second thought, as though she had always had the run of the room, which in truth she had for some weeks past. Belle says you have had a letter that has put you in a temper, she said, and that the whole household is walking on its toes. I have come to see the letter. She rolled to the desk. You need not hide it. I know my father's hand. I saw the seal from the hall. She held out her hand. Give it here, you ought. He did not want her to read it. He wanted, with a fierceness that surprised him, to burn it in the grate before her eyes rather than let her see, one more time, the small measure of her father's love. But he had promised her a house in which she was not managed, in which she was not carried past the hard things and left at the foot of them, and he would not break that promise now to spare her a pain she was, He suspected, better armored against than he was. He gave her the letter. She read it. He watched her face, and her face did not change. That was the terrible thing, that a young woman of 22 should be able to read such a letter about herself and let nothing show, having plainly had so much practice. And when she had finished, she folded it along its own creases and set it back upon the desk and folded her hands upon it. Well, she said, he has not troubled to be original. He tried the same threat upon a suitor of my cousin's once, though then it was a matter of a scandal invented whole. This at least has the merit of being true. I cannot walk. Society will indeed say cruel things if it has not already. He is not wrong about that. She looked up at him. The question you ought is what you mean to do. And I find I want to know the answer very much, so I will thank you not to spare my feelings, which are not so fragile as everyone insists on believing. Ewart came round the desk and sat, not in his great chair, but in the low chair beside hers, so that their eyes were level. A thing he had learned to do in these weeks without thinking, because he had seen how she hated to be loomed over, spoken down to, addressed from above like a child in a nursery. I mean to do nothing that he asks, said the Duke of Octane. I will not pay him a farthing. Not because of the money. I would give him 10 times the sum and never feel it, to be rid of him, but because a man who is paid once to hold his tongue is paid every quarter day for life, and each payment tells him his tongue is worth the buying. And I will not teach him that lesson at your expense. He has sold you once. He shall not sell the fact of you again and again for the rest of his days. Then he will talk, said Jessamy. You understand that. He will go into the town and the assembly rooms and the drawing rooms, and he will weep into his wine about his poor crippled daughter married off to the beast of Octane, and he will make of it whatever tale sits best with his hearers, and society will feast upon it. The Duke who married a cripple. The Duke who could get no whole woman to have him and so bought a broken one from her father. Her voice did not rise, but a muscle moved in her jaw. I have heard the words, Ewart. I know exactly the words. I have spent 15 years hearing them said just out of my hearing, which is a place a person in a chair spends a great deal of her time, just out of hearing, being discussed. I know precisely what is coming. And I am asking whether you have the stomach for it, because I have long since grown mine, and it is you I am uncertain of. Ewart looked at her for a long moment. You think, he said slowly, that I will be ashamed. I think you have a great name and a great pride and 40 years of standing in the world, she said, and I think you married a woman who cannot walk, and I think when the whole county is laughing there is a kind of man who begins, however much he wishes not to hear the laughter in his own house. My father was such a man. He was fond of me once. I remember it. I remember being carried on his shoulders before the fever, when I could still, before. And then the world laughed at him for having a daughter who could not walk, and the fondness could not survive the laughter, and it curdled into shame, and the shame into what you read in that letter. I have watched love turn to that, Ewart. I have watched it happen to me in one man already. You will forgive me if I am not eager to watch it a second time. The rain ran down the window. In the grate the fire settled. Ewart took her hand. He did it slowly, giving her time to draw it back, and she did not draw it back, and he held it in both of his. And it was small and cold, and he warmed it, and he looked at her, at the wife he had bought and had not touched, at the sharp, warm, brave mind of her armoured in 15 years of being just out of hearing. And he found that the thing he had been waiting to be certain of he had been certain of for weeks. Jessamy, he said, listen to me, for I am going to say a thing I have not said to a living soul in 20 years, and I am not practised at it, and I would rather do a hard thing badly than a cowardly thing well. Let them laugh. Let your father talk in every drawing room in the 3 shires. Let them call me the beast who bought a broken bride. Do you know what they will be saying, Jessamy? They will be saying that I am the most fortunate man in England, and they will be saying it in the language of fools, who cannot tell fortune from misfortune and never could. I did not marry a woman who cannot walk. I married the only woman I have ever met whom I could not frighten, could not tire of, and could not, though I have tried, stop thinking of from the moment I lifted her out of that cursed carriage. Your legs are the least interesting thing about you, And I say that as a man who has come to find every single thing about you interesting to a degree that is frankly inconvenient to my peace of mind. She had gone very still. You are not carried past the hard things in this house, he went on, so I will not carry you past this one. Here is the hard thing. I love you. I have loved you for some weeks and been too great a coward to say it, telling myself I was being patient when I was only being afraid. Afraid that I had bought the one good thing in my life, and that it could therefore never be freely given, and that if I reached for it I should only prove myself the beast they name me. But I find I would rather be a beast who has spoken than a gentleman who has not. So there it is. I love you. You need do nothing with it. You need not say it back, now or ever. But you asked whether I had the stomach for the world's laughter, and the answer is that I would stand in the middle of the county assembly and let every soul in it laugh themselves sick, so long as I might carry you home afterward. That is my stomach for it. I hope it will serve. Jessamy Ottley of Octarn looked her husband, and for once, for the first time since he had opened a carriage door on a golden dusk and found her taking his measure, there was nothing guarded in her face at all. It was open and astonished, and her grey eyes had filled, and she made no attempt now to look down and master it, but let him see. You great fool of a man, she said, and her voice was not steady at all. You have had it since the courtyard. You have had it since you shouted at my father across your own gravel that you did not conduct your affairs at shouting distance. I have been so busy waiting for the fondness to curdle that I never once considered it might do the other thing instead, might grow. I did not know love could grow. I thought it only ever curdled. No one ever showed me the other. And here you are showing me, in your cold house you have torn apart room by room only so that I might roll through it without asking leave of a soul. She stopped. She pressed her free hand to her mouth. I love you too, you impossible man. Of course I love you. I have loved you since the chair came 11.5 miles in the dark. What did you imagine that was, if not the whole of my heart handed over on a set of wheels? Now kiss me, before I lose my nerve, for I have never done it and I do not know how, and I will not learn any younger. And the Duke of Octarn, who had been waiting so patiently for so long, put his hand to his wife's cheek and leaned in and kissed her gently in the low chair beside her own. With the rain on the window and the fire in the grate, and she was clumsy at it and then she was not. And when at last he drew back, her eyes were wet and shining and she was laughing, and he thought he had never in his life heard so fine a sound. There, she said unsteadily. That was not so difficult. I cannot think why people make such a fuss. Do it again, so that I may be sure of my conclusions. I am a woman of science, as you know. He did it again. He would, he thought, be glad to do it again for the rest of his natural life, and count each doing a fortune the county in its foolishness would never learn to reckon. But the letter still upon the desk, folded along its creases, and Sir Roderick Utley was still in the town, in debt to dangerous men, with a poison to sell and a grievance to nurse, and the world outside the rain-streaked window had not yet begun to laugh, but it would. Ewart knew it would. And he knew, holding his wife's face in his hands, that loving her openly would not spare her the cruelty to come. It would only mean that when the cruelty came, they would meet it together, and that he must now find a way not merely to endure the world's contempt, but to break it, cleanly and publicly and for good, so that no man might ever again make a coin of the fact of her. He did not yet know how. But he had a fortnight until the county assembly, where all the 3 shires would gather, and where, he was already certain, his wife's father meant to make his opening move. In the days that followed, Ewart set about the business of loving his wife as thoroughly and openly as he had once done everything coldly, and the household did not know what to make of him, and was delighted. He took his breakfast with her every morning now, in the sunny east room, and disputed the newspapers, and lost more of the arguments than he won and did not mind. He carried her out into the gardens when the rain lifted, through paths Perkins had gravelled smooth for her chair, and named the plants for her wrongly on purpose so that she might correct him, which she did with great relish, having found among his books an old herbal that she had all but committed to memory. He had a table built to the height of her chair for the library, and another for the morning room, and a writing slope made to fit across the arms of the chair itself, so that she might write her letters anywhere she chose. He watched her flower under being wanted. And he understood that he had never truly seen her until now, for she had held so much of herself in reserve those first weeks, armored against the day the fondness curdled. And now that the day had not come and would not, she was unfolding, and she was unfolded more than he had dared to hope. "You are courting me," she accused him one afternoon in the long gallery, where he had wheeled her to see the light come with the west windows and had stayed to watch it fall across her face instead of the paintings. "We are already married, and you are courting me. It is highly irregular. What can you possibly hope to gain? You have already got me. I signed the register myself. There is no undoing it. I have got your hand," said the Duke of Octarn, "and, lately, and to my astonishment, your heart. I have not yet got good opinion of my character, which you continue to withhold on the grounds that I name the plants wrongly, and I find I want it more than I have ever wanted anything, and I do not know how a man gets such a thing except by courting. So I am courting. You must bear it. I am new to happiness, and I am overdoing it. Bell tells me I smile now in a manner that frightens the footman worse than my old scowl. I cannot help it." She laughed and caught his hand and drew it to her cheek and held it there, and for a while they were quiet in the west light, and Ewart thought that if the world would only let them alone he should want nothing else, ever, than this gallery and this light and this woman's face against his hand. He learned, in those days, the particular geography of her body's freedoms and its constraints, and learned it not as a nurse learns an infirmity but as a lover learns a beloved, so that the knowing was tender and not clinical. He learned that she could bear her own weight upon her arms for a short while, and was proud of it, and did not thank a person who forgot and reached to do for her what she could do herself, and that she could not for long, and was not ashamed to say so and to ask. And that the whole art of loving her, he came to understand, lay in the narrow ground between doing too much and too little, in offering without imposing, in being there without hovering, in holding out a hand she might take or refuse as she chose. He was not always graceful at it. He erred more than once on the side of doing too much, and was told so tartly and mended his ways, and once, badly, he erred the other way and left her stranded at the foot of a stair he had not yet had ramped, too proud himself to admit he had forgotten, and she had been so coldly furious with him, and so plainly hurt beneath the fury, that he had knelt on the stone at her wheel and begged her pardon in earnest, and meant it. "You must not do that," she had said, when the worst of it had passed and she had let him take her hand again. "You must not forget me, Ewart. Everyone forgets me. It is the great fact of my life that I am so easily forgotten at the bottoms of stairs, left in the carriage, set down in a corner and overlooked. I had thought, I had let myself think, that you were the one person who would not. Do not prove me wrong in it. I can bear a great deal. I have borne a great deal. I do not think I could bear being forgotten by you. You will not be," he had said, and had the stair ramped within the week, and never forgot her again as long as he lived. And it was that afternoon, kneeling on the cold stone with her hand in his, that he understood the whole weight of what he had taken on when he lifted her from the carriage. Not a burden, but a trust, the trust of a person who had been failed by everyone and had decided, against all her hard-won caution, to risk being failed once more by him, and he swore to himself, silently on the stone, that he would rather die than be one more of the people who had let her down, but the world would not let him alone. He knew it. And so, 3 days before the county assembly, he sat with her in the library after dinner and laid the matter plainly before her, as he had promised always to do. "Your father is in the town still," he said. "My man Croft has watched him for me. He has been talking Jessamy in the taverns, and to a few of the lesser gentry who will drink with anyone. The tale as much as you predicted. The beast of Octarn, who could get no whole woman and bought a broken one to breed in hair upon, because no lady of quality would have him." He said the words flatly, having learned that she preferred the truth undressed. "It is a small tale yet, confined to small people. But the assembly is in 3 days, and the whole of the 3 shires will be there, and I haven't doubt he means to be there too, and to weep his tale into the ear of Lady Marchbury, who is the greatest gossip in the county, and whose good opinion makes and unmakes reputations from here to the sea. If she takes up the tale, it will be everywhere by Sunday, and it will follow you into every room you enter for the rest of your life. That is what we face. I wished you to know the shape of it before I told you what I mean to do about it. Jessamy set down her book. "And what do you mean to do about it?" "I mean," said Ewart, "to take my wife to the county assembly." She went very still. "I have not appeared in society in 4 years," he went on. "Not since my first wife died. I have refused every invitation. The county believes me a recluse and a monster, and it is not entirely wrong, for I made myself into something very like both. When I appear at the assembly for the first time in 4 years, with a wife upon my arm, with a wife in a chair upon my arm, every eye in the 3 shires will be upon us. Your father is counting on that. He means for the whole county to see the beast and his broken bride, and to draw the cruel conclusion, and to laugh. He has arranged his stage very cleverly. I mean to walk out upon it and turn his play into a different one." "How?" she said. Her voice was low. "Ewart, you cannot fight a whole assembly room. You cannot challenge 400 people to be kind. Cruelty in a crowd is a fire. It does not care what you do. It only wants fuel. If we go, we hand it the fuel. If we stay away, we hand my father the tale uncontested, and he wins by our absence. There is no move here that does not lose. I have turned it over 100 times. It is a position with no good square. I have played enough chess in my chair, husband, waiting out the long afternoons of my life, to know a lost position when I see one. There is one move," said Ewart. "It is not on the board you are looking at. You are looking at the board of what they will think of you, Jessamy. And on that board you are right. There is no winning square, because it is their board and they have set it against you. So I do not mean to play on it. I mean to overturn it." He leaned toward her. "Here is what I have learned in 40 years of being feared," he said. "A crowd will laugh at a man who is ashamed. It will never laugh at a man who is proud and glad and entirely without shame. It does not know how. It loses its nerve. The fire finds no fuel in gutters. Your father's whole tale requires that I be ashamed of you. It is the beam the entire structure rests upon. Every version of the story, the beast, the broken bride, the bargain, every one of them requires that some part of me be hiding you, apologizing for you, wishing you were otherwise. Take away my shame and the whole tale falls down, because there is nothing left for anyone to pity or despise. There is only a duke who is plainly, publicly, and without the smallest reservation delighted with his wife. And a man who is delighted with his wife is not a figure of scorn, Jessamy. He is a figure of envy, and envy does not laugh. Envy goes very quiet, and looks at its own marriage and wonders. Jessamy was watching him now with an expression he had not seen before. "So this is my plan," said the Duke of Octon, "and you may veto any part of it, for it is your body they will be staring at and yours the choice of how it is shown. I will not appear at the assembly with a wife I am managing. I will appear with a wife I am courting, before the whole county, so plainly that a blind man could read it. I will not push your chair as though it were a burden I bear. I will walk beside you as though it were the finest carriage in England, and I the luckiest man to be allowed to walk at its wheel. When Lady Marchbury looks for the shame in my face that makes your father's tale, she will find delight instead, and she will not know what to do with it, for she has no story for a duke who is glad. And when your father comes to weep his tale into her ear, she will look across the room at the plain fact of us, and his tale will die in his mouth, because the room will already have seen the truth with its own eyes, and the truth is not the one he is selling." "And if it does not work," said Jessamy, "if they laugh anyway?" "Then they laugh," said Ewart, "and I carry you home, exactly as I told you I would, and we are precisely as happy tomorrow as we are tonight, for their laughter cannot touch the thing between us. It can only touch the thing between us and them, and I find I care nothing for that thing at all. The risk, Jessamy, is real, but it is not to us. It is only to our standing with people whose good opinion, when I examine it honestly, I do not want, since it is contingent upon your being hidden. I would rather have the county's contempt with you beside me than its whole warm regard with you shut away in a back room where it need never be embarrassed by the sight of you. I have done the second thing. I did it to my whole life for 4 years. I will not do it to you." Jessamy was quiet for a long moment. The fire burned, and then she said in a small, unsteady voice, quite unlike her usual dry certainty, "You would truly walk beside my chair before the whole county, and let them see you glad of me. I would truly do it," said Ewart. "And I would not be pretending, Jessamy. That is the part your father can never account for, because it is a thing he cannot imagine. I would not be playing at gladness. I would be glad. It is the easiest part of the whole scheme. It requires no acting at all. She put her hands over her face then, and her shoulders shook, and for a bad moment he thought he had wounded her, and then he saw that she was laughing and weeping at once. And she took her hands away, and her face was wet and blazing and more alive than he had ever seen it. "Very well," she said. "Very well, you impossible, splendid man. We shall go to the assembly. We shall go to the assembly, and you shall court me across the whole floor of it, and my father may choke on his own tail. But you must promise me one thing, Ewart, and you must promise it truly, for I will need it when the moment comes, and I am sitting in that great bright room with 400 pairs of eyes upon my chair and my legs, and my father sharpening his tail in the corner. And I will be afraid then, however brave I am now, for I am always afraid in that moment. It is the one thing I have never grown a stomach for, the moment of being looked at." "Name it," said the Duke of Octon. "Do not let go of my hand," she said, "whatever happens in that room, however it goes. I do not care if it is not the fashion. I do not care if a duke does not hold his wife's hand across an assembly floor. I do not care what Lady Marchbury makes of it. When they are all looking, and I am afraid, do not let go of my hand. That is the whole of it. That is all I ask. Give me that, and I will face the entire 3 shires and every cruel word my father has to sell, and I will not so much as blink." Ewart took her hand from her wet face and held it in both of his and pressed his lips to it. "Jessamy," he said, "I have not let go of your hand since the courtyard, and I do not intend to begin at the assembly. You have my word, which is a thing I have given to very few people and broken for none. When they look, I will be holding your hand, and I will be smiling, and it will be the truest thing in the room." And so it was decided, and the 2 of them sat late into the night by the library fire, planning the small particulars of a public happiness, the way other couples might plan a campaign. And outside the rain had turned to a hard, clear cold, and 11 miles distant in a mean room above a tavern, Sir Roderick Utley sharpened his tail and counted his dwindling coins, and never once imagined that the beast of Octon intended to meet him not with shame, but with joy, the one weapon in all the world against which the man had laid no plan at all. The county assembly was held in the great rooms above the Marden Exchange, and on the night of it the whole of the 3 shires poured up the wide lit stair in silk and superfine, and the candles blazed in their hundreds, and the musicians tuned in the gallery, and every soul in the county who mattered, and a good many who only wished to, packed themselves into the long bright hall to see and be seen. And then the Duke of Octon arrived, and the room forgot to breathe. Ewart had timed it deliberately, not early, when the room was thin, nor so late as to seem shy, but at the full flood of the evening, when the hall was at its most crowded and its most watchful. He came up the stair without haste, in a coat of midnight blue that Belle had laboured over for a week, and at his side, wheeled by no servant but by his own hand, came his wife. He had refused to let a footman push her chair. That had been the first argument of the evening, and he had won it. He would not have Jessamy handed into that room like a parcel behind a liveried servant. He would bring her in himself at his own side, his hand upon her chair as another man's might rest upon his wife's arm. And so they came into the great bright hall together, the feared Duke and his wife in her chair, and Ewart felt the whole room turn toward them like a field of wheat before a wind, and at the sound a crowd makes when it has been waiting for a spectacle, and the spectacle arrives, that low swelling murmur, half hunger and half glee. He felt Jessamy's hand find the arm of her chair and grip it white. He stopped just within the doors in the full light, where all could see. And instead of hurrying her through, instead of finding a quiet corner in which to shelter her from the eyes, he did the thing they had planned, the thing that was not on anyone's board. He came round to the front of her chair, in view of the entire assembly, and he went down, the Duke of Octon. The beast went down on one knee before his wife in the middle of the county assembly, so that his face was below hers, looking up, and 400 people saw a duke kneel, and he took her gloved hand in both of his and raised it to his lips and kissed it, slowly, his eyes upon her face the whole while, as though there were no one in the room at all. "Courage, wife," he said low, "for her alone. though the whole room strained to hear it and could not. "I have your hand. I will not let it go. Look at me and nowhere else. Let them look at us. You need only look at me." He saw the fear in her, and he saw her master it, saw her lift her chin in that way he had first seen through a carriage window on a golden dusk, saw the grey eyes steady, and he saw her look at him, only at him, and find her footing in his face. And he watched the fear give way, not to a performance of courage, but to the real thing, warmed through by the truth that he was there and glad and kneeling before the world at her wheel. "Get up, you ridiculous man," she murmured, but her mouth was trembling toward a smile. "You are making a scene. A duke does not kneel at an assembly. It is not done. Lady Marchbury will have palpitations." "Let her," said Ewart, rising and drawing her hand through to rest upon his arm so that they were joined, chair and man, in a single line the whole room could read. "Let the entire county have palpitations. I have been dead 4 years, Jessamy, and tonight I intend to be seen to be alive, and I intend the county to understand exactly what has raised me. Come, we are going to cross this room, slowly. And we are going to greet Lady Marchbury first of all, before your father can reach her, and we are going to do it smiling. Are you ready?" she said. "Cross it anyway. Do not let go." "Never," said the Duke of Octarn, and they went out together into the middle of the floor. He would remember that crossing all his life. The hall fell nearly silent as they came, the murmur dying to a held breath, 400 people watching the beast of Octarn walk the length of the assembly at the wheel of his wife's chair, his hand over her gloved hand where it rested on his arm. His head bent to her, saying something, asking her, in fact, whether she thought the musicians in the gallery had been at the punch, for they were murdering the second violin most cruelly, so that she laughed, a real bright laugh, in the middle of the silent room. And the sound of it went through the assembly like a bell, and Ewart saw heads turn to one another, saw the confusion begin, saw the story they had come to be told fail to arrive, for they had come to see shame. They had come to see a duke hiding a burden, a broken bride shrinking from the light, a bargain both parties regretted. And what they saw instead was a woman laughing, and a duke bending to hear her, and neither of them shrinking from anything at all, a couple so plainly, so unanswerably glad of one another that the gladness filled the space where the pity was meant to go, and left the pity nowhere to stand. Lady Marchbury received them like a woman who had prepared one speech and found herself needing quite another. She was a formidable dame of 60 in purple silk, with a lorgnette she used as other women used a fan, and she had, Ewart did not doubt, been the intended vessel of Sir Roderick's tale, was perhaps expecting the man even now. She looked at the Duke, and she looked at his wife, and she raised the lorgnette and looked at them both together, and Ewart watched her hunt in Jessamy's face for the pitiable creature the tale required and failed to find her. "Your Grace," she said. "This is," she hunted for it, "a very great surprise. We had not thought to see you in society again. And this is the Duchess of whom we have heard." The lorgnette flicked ever so slightly toward the chair, toward the legs beneath the fine skirts, and Ewart felt Jessamy's hand tighten on his arm, "of whom we have heard a very little," and there it was, the opening. The small cruelty, the lorgnette upon the legs, the invitation to shame laid before them as neat as a trap. But Ewart had promised his wife she would not be carried past the hard things, and he had come to believe that she'd not need him to answer for her, and so he did not. He held her hand, and he held his tongue, and he looked at his wife and left the square to her. Jessamy Utterly of Octarn met Lady Marchbury's lorgnette without a flicker. "You have heard a very little, my lady," she said, "and I fear most of it wrong, for it comes from my father, who is an interested party and a poor historian. Permit me to correct the record, since it saves everyone the trouble of whispering it inaccurately behind their hands. I cannot walk. I have not walked since I was 7 years old, when a fever took the use of my legs. It is not catching, it is not a judgment, and it is not, I am reliably informed by my husband, the least interesting thing about me, though I confess I am biased, having heard him say it a great many times, and being disposed to believe him because he is very handsome when he says it." A ripple of startled laughter from those near enough to hear. "Now you know the whole of it, and may enjoy the rest of your evening without the fatigue of speculation. I find people are so much easier when the mystery is taken away. Mystery is exhausting. I have never had the luxury of it. One cannot be mysterious in a chair. One is always so very visible, and I have decided it is no loss. Do you dance, Lady Marchbury? My husband does not, he tells me, and I obviously cannot, so we are reduced to watching, and I find I want a knowledgeable companion to tell me which of these young people are in love and which are only pretending. You look to me like a woman who would know the difference at 40 paces. There was a silence of perhaps 2 seconds, and then Lady Marchbury laughed, a real laugh, surprised out of her, a great honking undignified laugh entirely unlike her usual measured amusement, and lowered the lorgnette, and looked at Jessamy with something that had wholly changed. My dear, she said, I would know it at 50. Sit by me. That one, she nodded toward a young man across the floor, is desperately in love with the girl in yellow, and she is desperately in love with his 4,000 a year, and it will be a very comfortable marriage and a perfect misery, and I have been watching it ripen for a month. Come and be told everything. Your Grace, you may fetch us punch, and be glad you have brought me the first amusing woman to enter these rooms in a decade. Wherever did you find her? In a carriage, said the Duke of Octarn, on a golden evening, taking my measure through the window. I have been the richer for it every day since. He bowed. I will fetch the punch. And that was the turn of the whole night, and Ewart, crossing the floor to the punch table, understood that the battle was already won, not by him in the end, but by her. By Jessamy meeting the lorgnette with the plain unashamed truth and a joke, so that the most powerful gossip in the county was even now installing him beside her like a prize, and would spend the rest of the evening telling everyone who approached what a delight the new Duchess of Octarn was, and what a fool a person would look to say otherwise. The tale was dead. It had died in the 2 seconds before Lady Marchbury laughed. There was no shame anywhere in the room for the fire to feed on, and so there was no fire. Not every soul in the room surrendered so gracefully. There was a Mrs. Fenwick, the wife of a wealthy grazier lately come into money and hungry for the standing to match it, who had staked a good deal of her own consequence, Ewart gathered, on being among the first to repeat Sir Roderick's tale, and who could not now bear to see it fail. She approached the pair of them near the supper-room with a smile like sugared vinegar, and made her curtsy and said, in a voice pitched to carry to the little knot of listeners she had gathered, that she did so admire the Duchess's courage in coming out into company, that she was sure she herself could never have found the nerve, that it must be such a trial, poor thing, to be stared at so, and did the Duchess not find the whole evening a very great strain upon her nerves and her, she let the lorgnette of her glance fall, as Lady Marchbury's had, to the chair. Her constitution. Ewart felt his temper rise and held it, for he had learned by now not to answer for his wife unless she wished it, and he waited, his hand over hers, to see whether she wished it. She did not. How kind of you to be concerned for my nerves, Mrs. Fenwick, said Jessamy pleasantly. You may set them entirely at rest. I find the staring no trial at all, having been stared at my whole life, and having concluded long ago that the fault in staring lies always with the starer and never with the stared at. So that I am able to look upon a room full of people examining me with the same tranquil interest a naturalist brings to a colony of industrious ants, each following its instinct, none to be blamed for it, and all of them, collectively, rather instructive to observe. As for the strain, I confess the only strain I feel this evening is the effort of appearing not to notice which of my fellow guests have come chiefly to be seen doing the noticing. It is a small strain. I bear it easily. I have borne worse. But how good of you to ask, and in so carrying a voice. Do enjoy your supper. The lobster patties are said to be very fine, and you have quite earned one. The little knot of listeners who had gathered to hear the Duchess put in her place found they had instead heard Mrs. Fenwick put in hers, and being, most of them, no great friends to that ambitious lady, they did not trouble to hide their amusement, and Mrs. Fenwick, scarlet, dropped a curtsy and retreated, and did not trouble the Duchess of Octarn again that season or any other. Ewart looked down at his wife with an admiration he made no effort to conceal. You did not need me at all, he said. I never needed you to fight for me, said Jessamy low, squeezing his hand. I have always been able to fight. What I needed, what I never had until you, was someone to stand beside me while I did it, and not take the sword out of my hand thinking to spare me the trouble. You let me keep my sword, Ewart. Do you know how rare that is in the people who claim to love a person like me? They are forever snatching the sword away, out of kindness, and leaving one defenseless in the name of protection. You hand it to me and stand at my shoulder. That is the whole of it. That is everything. He was the punch table, in fact, when Sir Roderick Otley finally arrived. Ewart saw him come up the stair, saw him pause in the doorway, scanning the room for the scene he had come to preside over, the scene of his daughter's humiliation and his son-in-law's shame, and saw the exact moment the man found instead his daughter enthroned at Lady Marchbury's side. The two women's heads together, laughing, the whole warm centre of the room's attention, saw him understand that he had come too late and to the wrong play, saw the tail curdle in his mouth before he could speak a word of it. Ewart set down the punch and crossed the room to his wife's father, unhurried, and stood before him and spoke very low, so that no one else could hear, and smiled the whole while, so that no one watching would see anything but a duke greeting his father-in-law with cold civility. "Good evening, Sir Roderick," said the Duke of Octon. "You are come to sell your tale, and you find the market closed. Look at your daughter. Look at her well, for it is the last you will see of her tonight, and very likely the last you will see of her ever, and I want you to carry the picture away with you. That is a woman the whole county will be courting by Sunday. That is the most sought-after guest in these rooms. And you sold her to me for the price of a hunter, because you were ashamed of her, and could not see what any man with eyes could have seen, which is that she is worth more than everything you have ever owned or gambled or lost, 10 times over, and always was. From the day the fever took her legs to this one. That is not my triumph over you, Sir Roderick. It is only yours over yourself, and it is complete. Now go home. There is nothing for you here. There never was. You held a fortune, and you sold it for tavern money, and you will spend the rest of your life knowing it, and I find that is punishment enough, so I will do nothing further to you at all. Good night." And he turned his back upon the man, and walked away, and did not look to see him go, but heard, a few moments later, the heavy tread descending the stair, and knew that Sir Roderick Otley had left the assembly, and the county, and his daughter's life, defeated not by cruelty, but by the one thing he had never once thought to guard against. The sight of the daughter he was ashamed of being cherished in public, before the whole world, by a man who was proud of her. Ewart carried the punch back to his wife. "You've been gone an age," said Jessamy, taking the glass, her eyes searching his face. "And there is a look about you, Ewart." "Was that?" "It was," he said. "He has gone. He will not trouble you again. I said nothing cruel to him, Jessamy. I promised you I would not fight the room, and I did not fight him either. I only made him look at you sitting here, being everything he threw away. That was the whole of it." It was enough. It was more than enough. He sat beside her and took her hand and lifted it to his lips again, before all of them, and did not care. "Lady Marchbury tells me you have accepted an invitation to her house on Thursday on both our behalfs without consulting me." "I have," said Jessamy serenely. "You will enjoy it. She has a library reputed to be the finest in the county, and a nephew who has written a monograph on the fossils of the coast that I mean to argue with over dinner. I have organized your whole social resurrection in the space of one evening, husband, from a chair, while you fetch punch. You are welcome." And the Duke of Octon threw back his head and laughed, in the middle of the county assembly. A great free laugh such as no one in the 3 shires had heard from him in living memory, and the whole room turned to look, and saw the beast of Octon laughing at something his wife had said, with her hand in his, and did not laugh at him at all, but wondered, every one of them, quietly, what it might be to be loved like that, and went home to their own marriages the poorer for the knowing. Winter came down over Octon, and it was the happiest season the old house had known in the memory of anyone who served in it. The county, having taken up the new duchess, could not now put her down. Invitations arrived in a flood, and were accepted or declined according to the state of the library at the house in question, for Jessamy chose her engagements chiefly by their books. Lady Marchbury became her fast friend and fierce champion, and let it be known, in the particular voice that ended arguments, that anyone who found the Duchess of Octon's chair a subject for whispering would find themselves, thereafter, a subject for the Marchbury tongue, which was a fate no one in the 3 shires cared to risk. The tale Sir Roderick had meant to sell was not merely dead. It had been buried, and a quite different tale planted over it. The tale of the beast of Octarn tamed and made human by a wife cleverer than the whole county put together, which had the advantage of being true, and which the county told itself with great satisfaction, having always preferred a love story to a scandal when it could get one. And within the house, the marriage that had begun as a bargain became, week by quiet week, a marriage in truth. Ewart did not hurry it. He had told her, on their wedding night, that what was between them would come by her own wish or not at all, and he held to it, and it cost him something, for loving her openly had only sharpened the wanting. But he had waited before, and he found he could wait still, and the waiting itself became a kind of courtship. The long evenings by the library fire, the hand held, the head bent, the slow discovery of one another's minds that had, he thought, to come before the rest, and was more than half the rest already. It was Jessamy who ended the waiting in the end, as she ended most things, by naming it plainly. "You are being very patient with me," she said one night, when he had wheeled her to her chamber door and bent to bid her good night, as he did every night, and did not follow her in as he never did. "You are always being patient with me. It is a great virtue in you, and it is beginning to make me feel like an invalid, which you have promised me 100 times I am not. Ewart, I am your wife. I have been your wife for 3 months. You have kissed me a great many times at the library fire and never once at this door, and I have begun to wonder whether you think me too fragile for the rest of it, or whether—" Her chin came up, but he saw the fear beneath, the courage, the old fear, the one thing she had never grown a stomach for. "Whether you find, now that it comes to it, that a wife who cannot walk is a wife you cannot quite." "Stop," said Ewart. He knelt before her chair, as he had knelt before her at the assembly, so that his face was below hers, looking up. "Do not finish that sentence," he said, "for it is not true, and I will not have even the ghost of it in this house. I have not followed you through that door, because I promised you I would not take one step you did not freely wish, and I would rather want you at this door every night for the rest of my life than cross it 1 hour before you asked me to. That is the whole of it. There is no other reason. There is no reservation in me, Jessamy. There has been none since the carriage. When I lifted you out of it, I felt your weight in my arms, and I have wanted the whole of you ever since, and the wanting has only grown, and if you doubt it, I am very willing to spend the rest of this night at this door proving it to you in whatever words you require, though I had rather—" "Then come in," said Jessamy Utley of Octarn, and her voice shook, and her eyes were bright, and she put her hand to his face where he knelt before her. "Come in, husband. I am asking. I have been asking with everything but the words for a month, and you are too honourable to hear anything but the words, so here are the words. Come in. Do not be patient any longer. I am done being waited for. I have been waited for and worked around and carried past my whole life. I do not want to be careful tonight, and I do not want you to be careful either. I want to be a wife, your wife. Come in." And the Duke of Octarn rose and gathered his wife into his arms as he had done on a golden dusk in a stone courtyard, and carried her across the threshold of her chamber, and the door closed upon them, and the fire burned low in the grate, and the winter night wrapped the old house in its quiet. And what passed between them then was their own, and tender, and long overdue, and no business of any tale-teller in the 3 shires. In the morning she woke in his arms, and he watched her wake, watched the grey eyes open and find him and fill, not with fear now, never again with fear, but with a wonder that had finally stopped bracing itself for the blow that did not come. And he thought that he had been a dead man for 4 years, and had not known it until this woman had been carried, in chains he had bought, into the ruined centre of him, and had set about, with her sharp, warm, patient hands, the slow work of bringing him back to life. "Good morning, wife," he said. "Good morning, husband," she said, and smiled, and it was the smile he had first glimpsed in the firelight of the great hall, the one that changed her whole face, only now it had no guard behind it at all. "I have concluded my researches. I am prepared to publish my findings." "And what are your findings?" "That the county is entirely correct," said Jessamy, "and I am the most fortunate woman in England, and I intend to remain so, and I will thank you not to argue, for I am very tired and very happy and disinclined to defend the point." "Kiss me," and then ring for bell, for I am also, I find, extremely hungry, and a woman cannot live on happiness alone, however she might wish to try. There was an evening in that deep winter that Ewart would keep by him always, small and bright, the kind of hour a man does not know he is storing up until he finds, years on, that it is one of the few he cannot do without. A great snow had come down and shut the roads, and the household was snug and idle, and he had carried Jessamy down to the library after dinner and built the fire up high, and they had meant to read and had not read, but had talked instead of nothing, of everything, of the books on the shelves and the tenants in the cottages and the strange chance that had brought them to be sitting in this room together, when by every reasonable expectation of either of their lives they ought to have been sitting alone, elsewhere, cold. And at some point in the talking she had grown tired, and he had seen it, and without a word he had lifted her from her chair and settled her against him on the long settle before the fire, her head upon his shoulder, the travelling rug that lived now over the back of the settle drawn across them both, and they had sat so in the firelight, in the great silent snowbound house, for a long time, saying little. "I used to dread the winters," she said at last, drowsily, into his coat, "at my father's house. The short days and the long dark and the cold, and nowhere to go and no one to see and nothing to do but sit by whatever window they had put me at and watch the year die. I dreaded them from October. I would count the days until the light came back. I thought I would dread them always, that it was simply a fact of a life like mine, that the winters would always be the enemy." She turned her face up to his. "And now I find I do not want this one to end. I have never in my life not wanted a winter to end. What have you done to me, husband? You have ruined my one reliable misery. I shall have nothing to dread now, and I shall not know what to do with myself." "You will learn to dread the spring instead," said Ewart gravely, "when the road's clear and the invitations come and Lady Marchbury descends upon us, and we must go out into the world and be admired, when we might have stayed by this fire. I dread it already. I have half a mind to bribe the weather to keep us snowed in until June." She laughed, low, against him, and he felt it more than heard it, and he tightened his arm about her and looked into the fire and thought that he had been given, in this one winter, more ordinary happiness than he had known in the whole of his life before, not the grand happiness of the assembly, the public triumph, the tale turned, but this, the small unremarkable warmth of a wife asleep against his shoulder in a firelit room while the snow came down. The happiness that asks no witness and makes no story and is, he was coming to understand, the only kind that finally matters. He did not wake her. He sat with her asleep against him until the fire burned down to embers, and only then carried her up, and thought that he could have sat there until morning and counted it no hardship at all. The peace of that winter held until February, when it was broken, as Ewart had half feared it might be, by the last cold shadow of Sir Roderick Utley to fall across their lives. The men came on a grey afternoon, 3 of them, hard men from the town, the dangerous men to whom Sir Roderick had owed sums he could not name, and Ewart, who had put out inquiries after the assembly and knew a good deal more about his father-in-law's affairs than his father-in-law would have liked, was not entirely surprised to see them ride up his drive. He received them in the great hall, standing, with Croft and 2 grooms within call, and heard their business, which was ugly and simple. Sir Roderick was dead, taken by an apoplexy in a gaming house in the city 3 weeks past, they said, with his debts unpaid, and they had come to see whether the dead man's grandson-in-law might be persuaded, for the sake of the family name, to settle what the family owed. Ewart heard them out, and then he told them, in the flat cold voice that had made men call him the Beast, exactly 3 things. That he had paid Sir Roderick Utley once for his wife, and considered the account between their families closed forever by that transaction. That the debts of a dead man died with him, and were no charge upon a daughter who had been sold out of his house and owed him nothing, least of all his gambling losses, and that if any one of the 3 of them, or any man they knew, ever again set foot upon Octarn land, or spoke the Duchess's name in a public house, or troubled his wife in any particular however small, the full weight of his name and his purse and his considerable acquaintance among the magistrates of 3 counties would fall upon them so hard, and so completely that they would wish the apoplexy had taken them alongside their debtor. And then he had them shown out, and stood at the great doors watching them ride away down the winter drive, and felt the last thread that had bound Jessamy to the house of her father snap clean, and was glad. He did not mean to tell her that her father was dead. He stood a long while in the hall turning it over, and half decided to spare her, to carry her past this hardest thing of all, and then remembered his own promise, made in the firelight of their first evening, that she would not be managed in this house, not carried past the hard things and left at the foot of them, and knew that to keep the news from her would be to break that promise for the sake of his own comfort, dressed up as hers. So he went to find her in the library, in the window where the winter light came through, and he sat in the low chair beside her chair, and took her hand and told her plainly that men had come, that they were gone and would not return, and that her father was dead these 3 weeks in the city, and had died as he had lived, and that Ewart was sorry, not for the man. He could not pretend to that, but for her, for whatever it was in her that had once ridden on that man's shoulders before the fever and had loved him, and had watched the love curdle and might, he thought, grieve now not the father who had sold her but the father who had carried her, long ago, when she could not yet walk and did not yet need to. Jessamy was quiet for a long time, looking out at the winter light. I do not know what I feel, she said at last. I thought when it came, and I always knew it would come, he was not a man built to make old bones. I thought I would feel nothing, for he unmade my love for him so thoroughly, so deliberately, over so many years. But you are right, there was a father before the fever. He is the one I find I am grieving, a man who has been dead to me 15 years, who died a second time 3 weeks ago in a gaming house, and whom I loved when I was 7 and could still run to him. It is a strange thing to grieve a man twice, and both times for a person who stopped existing long before his body did. She turned from the window. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. Thank you for telling me. You might have kept it from me. Everyone always kept things from me, to spare me, to carry me past. You never do. Do you know, husband, that it is the thing I love in you above all the rest? Not that you carried me from the carriage. Many a man might carry a woman and still spend his whole life carrying her past every hard thing until she was smothered in the sparing of her. You carry me toward the hard things, and hold my hand while I face them, and let me face them myself. No one ever did that before. No one ever thought I was strong enough. You are the first person in my life who was not afraid of my strength. Ewart lifted her hand and kissed it. I was afraid of it from the first, he said. I am afraid of it still. It is the most formidable thing in 3 counties, your strength, and I go in daily terror of it, and I would not have you softened by a single degree, for the whole worth of you is in it. Grieve your father, Jessamy, the one worth grieving. I will sit with you while you do. I have nowhere I would rather be, and nothing I would rather do, than sit in this window and hold your hand in the winter light, for as long as you have need of it, which I hope is a very long while, for I have grown greedy of these afternoons. And so they sat, the Duke and his Duchess, in the window where the light came through hand in hand, while the short winter day drew down, and Jessamy grieved the father she had lost twice, and Ewart held her hand and did not let it go, and outside the snow began to fall over the gardens Perkins had gravelled smooth for her chair, and over the drive down which the hard men had ridden away, and over the whole of the great estate that had been a mausoleum and was now, past all expectation, a home. And when at last she had wept what she had to weep, and the room had gone blue with dusk, she turned to him with the winter light almost gone from her face, and said a thing that changed, once more and finally, the shape of all their days to come. I am going to have a child, said Jessamy. Your child? In the summer, I think, by my reckoning, though I am no physician. I have been certain a fortnight and afraid to tell you, which is absurd, for I am afraid of nothing else in the world. And I do not know why I should be afraid of this, except that it is the one thing I most want to give you, and I did not know how you would take it, and I have so many years learning to expect the worst of how people take things concerning me, that the habit dies hard even now, even with you, even after everything. Ewart did not speak. He could not for a moment. He sat in the blue dusk holding his wife's hand, and looked at her, and felt the whole of his chest go tight and then break open. And when he found his voice it was not steady at all, which she noted he could see, with great interest, for she had never heard it so. Afraid of how I would take it, he said. Jessamy, There has been a tale told about us, you know it well, the tale your father meant to sell, that the beast of Octon bought a broken wife to breed an heir upon, because no whole woman would have him. I have hated that tale above all the others, more even than the ones about me alone, because of the word it used for you, and the use it made of you, as though you were a broodmare I had purchased for a purpose. And now you tell me you carry my child, and you are afraid, and I understand your fear, for the tale is in the air we breathe, and I want to be very clear, wife, before I am too glad to be coherent, so hear me now while I can still speak. He took her other hand so that he held them both. I did not want an heir, he said. I did not marry you for one. I have gone 3 months as your husband in every way and never once thought of it as a duty or a purpose. And if you had told me tonight that we should never have a child, I would have been exactly as happy tomorrow as I am today, and loved you not 1 grain the less, and considered myself the most fortunate man in England still, for the whole of my fortune is you and always was, and no child could add to it or a childless life subtract from it. Do you believe me? It matters to me very much that you believe me, tonight of all nights, that you are not a means to any end, that you never were, that the worth of you is entire in yourself and owes nothing to what you can give me. Do you believe it? I believe it, she whispered. I have believed it since the assembly, since you knelt. A man does not kneel to a means to an end. Then hear the rest, said Ewart, and now the gladness broke through and his voice cracked with it and he did not care. Having said all that, and meant it to my bones, Jessamy, I am so glad I can hardly breathe. A child, our child, yours and mine, made not out of a bargain, but out of this, out of what we have built in this house, out of a love I had given up on and you gave back to me. Yes, yes. In the summer, I will build the whole house over again for it. I will gravel every path, I will. He stopped and laughed, a broken glad sound, and pressed her hands to his lips. I do not know what I am saying. I am not a coherent man tonight. You have unmade me entirely, and I am glad of it. Come here. Let me hold you. Both of you. Let me hold you both. And he gathered his wife into his arms in the blue winter dusk and held her, and felt her laughing and weeping against his shoulder, and thought that a man might live a whole cold life and be given, at the last, in a single winter, more warmth than he had any right to, and that the only proper answer to such a gift was to spend the rest of his days deserving it. The child came in July, in the green heart of the summer, a daughter, and the birth was hard. Ewart spent the length of it walking the corridor outside the chamber like a man possessed, and would afterward count it the worst night of his life and the best morning, but the mother came through it strong, as he had known in his bones she would. For she was the strongest thing in 3 counties, and a summer's labour would not undo what 15 years of the world's cruelty had failed to. He was let into the room at dawn. He found his wife propped against the pillows, pale and spent and luminous, with a small dark-haired bundle in the crook of her arm, and she looked up at him over the child with the grey eyes that had taken his measure through a carriage window a lifetime ago, and she said, "Come and meet your daughter, husband. She has your scowl already. Belle says she has never seen so ducal a scowl on so new a face. I think we had better call her something that will stand up to it." They named her Grace, not for the title, though the county chose to think so, but for the thing itself, the unearned gift of it, the mercy that had come to 2 people who had each given up on being given anything at all. Ewart held his daughter that first morning in the arms that had lifted her mother from a carriage, and found them entirely adequate to the task, and thought that he had been afraid, once, of a great many things, of the world's laughter, of his own dead heart, of reaching for a good thing and finding it turn to ash, and that he was afraid of none of them now, for he had faced the whole of the 3 shires with this woman's hand in his and learned that there was nothing on the far side of his fears but more life. If a man only had the courage to walk toward them, or to walk toward them at the wheel of a chair, holding on, the years came on as years do. Octon, which had been a mausoleum and become a home, became at last a place full of life, for Grace was not the last of them. A son followed 2 years after, dark and grave and devoted to his mother past all reason, and then another daughter, bright and headlong, who learned before she could well walk to climb into her mother's chair and ride in her lap through the smooth gravelled gardens, shrieking with joy. so that the whole estate grew used to the sight of the Duchess of Octarn wheeling her laughing children through the roses, and thought nothing of it, but that it was a fine thing to see. The children never knew their mother as anything but their mother. The chair was simply the chair. The thing Mama moved about in, no stranger to them than a horse or a carriage, and he would watch them grow up without the smallest notion that there was anything to pity in the woman who bore and raised and ruled them, and knew that this, too, was her doing, that she had made. Out of the ground of her own hard life, a place where her children need never learn the cruelty she had been steeped in, and that it was perhaps the finest of all the many fine things she made, for she made a great deal. She took the estate books fully in hand within a year of her marriage, and set the north tenancies right, and then the rest, so that Octarn, which had been drifting under Ewart's cold indifferent stewardship, grew prosperous and well managed and kind, for she would not tolerate a hard bailiff or a family turned out or a cottage left to rot. Having known too well herself what it was to be a burden the powerful found convenient to be rid of, she built a school in the village. She endowed, over her husband's laughing protests at the cost and his instant provision of the whole sum, a small hospital in the town, and took a particular interest in its provision for those the world was accustomed to shut away, the halt, the lamed, the ones in chairs, insisting, in the teeth of every physician's opinion, that such persons be built for and not merely housed, that the world be made to fit them and not they be broken to fit the world. It became in time a noted thing, the Octarn Hospital, and people came from other counties to see how it was done, and were shown around it by a duchess in a wheeled chair who knew every ramp and threshold in it by heart, because she had specified each one herself, and the county, which had come to an assembly a lifetime ago to laugh at the beast and his broken bride, grew old telling instead the tale of the great Duchess of Octarn, the cleverest woman in the shire, the kindest, the one who had come out of nowhere, sold by a wastrel father, and made herself the heart of the whole country, and the Duke who worshipped her, who had been a monster until she gentled him, and who could still be seen, an old man now, walking every evening at the wheel of his wife's chair through the gardens, his hand over her hand, his head bent to hear her, exactly as he had first crossed an assembly floor with her 40 years before, for that never changed. Through all the years, through the children and the grandchildren, through the building and the ruling and the slow settling of two lives into one, the Duke of Octarn never once let go of his wife's hand in a room where people were looking, nor in a room where they were not. He had promised her, at an assembly, that when they looked he would be holding her hand and smiling, and it would be the truest thing in the room, and he kept the promise for the rest of his life, and it never stopped being true, and the county never stopped being quietly, wonderingly poorer for the sight of it. They grew old together at Octarn. There came an evening late, very late, decades on, when their hair had gone white and their children were grey themselves, and the house was full of the voices of a third generation, when the Duke of Octarn wheeled his wife out onto the terrace to see the sun go down, as he had done 10,000 times, and the low light came gold across the gardens, gold as it had come on the dusk. He first opened a carriage door and found her taking his measure, and he stopped the chair at the balustrade and came round to the front of it and lowered himself, more slowly now than he once had, to one knee before her, as he had knelt at the assembly, so that his old face was below hers, looking up. "What are you doing down there, you ridiculous man?" said Jessamy, but she was smiling the smile that had changed her whole face across a lifetime, and her hand was already reaching for his. "You will never get up again. Your knees are 80 years old. Belle will have to send the footman." "Let her," said Ewart. "I have wanted to look up at you from the day I first saw you sitting in that carriage above me, and I find I want to still, and I am too old now to pretend otherwise, so here I am, at your wheel, where I have spent my whole life and never once regretted a day of it." He took her hand in both of his, old hands over old, and raised it to his lips as he had done in a firelit hall a lifetime past. "I paid your father the price of a hunter for you, Jessamy. Did I ever tell you that? The price of a hunter. It is the great joke of my life. I have thought of it every day for 40 years. That I got the whole of my happiness, the whole of my life, everything, the children, this house come back to life, my own heart come back to life. I got all of it for the price of a horse. because a foolish, frightened man could not see what was sitting in front of him, and sold it cheap to be rid of it. I have never in all my days made another bargain half so good. I never shall. I got the better of the whole world in that courtyard, and the world has never once found me out." "You did not get the better of the world," said Jessamy softly, her old eyes bright in the gold light. "You got the better of me. You looked at a woman everyone else looked away from, and you carried her toward the hard things instead of past them, and you never once let go of her hand. That is the whole of it, Ewart. That is the whole of everything. It was never the carrying that undid me that first night. It was that you meant to set me down somewhere I could stand on my own, and hold my hand while I did it. No one had ever done that. No one had ever thought I could stand." She leaned down to him, slow and stiff and unafraid, and put her old hand to his old face. "You gave me back my legs, husband, in every way that ever mattered, and you never once cared that I could not walk. Now get up off that terrace before you cannot and sit by me, and watch the sun go down, and hold my hand while we do it. There is nothing on the far side of any of it but more of this, and I find I want all of it, every last evening down to the very last." And the Duke of Octane rose, slowly, from his knee and settled himself in the old chair beside her old chair, at the balustrade above the gardens, in the last gold light of the long day, and he took his wife's hand and did not let it go, and the two of them watched the sun go down over Octane together, the man who had been a beast and the woman he had bought and could never afterward believe he had been given so cheap, cherished and cherishing, treasured Paul telling, to the very end of their days, and if there is any justice in the making of things, well beyond it.